DACA fallout continues. What Catholic leaders are saying after the president halts the immigration program. Plus, Senator Luther Strange on the role of Congress in this debate. Hurricane Irma roars, hitting the Caribbean with record force. How the United States is preparing for yet another storm. Post-Castro Cuba, the communist country starts a transition period expected to end with Raul Castro's departure from the presidency. And the Pope heads to Colombia. How the Holy Father aims to help the country's peace process. We'll have a report from Rome. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, September 6th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C. Thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. The U.S. House overwhelmingly passes a nearly $8 billion Hurricane Harvey disaster relief package.
Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
President Trump says he agreed to a very good deal to fund the government and increase the nation's borrowing limit as part of the aid package. We'll have more on that package, plus a new U.S. hurricane threat. This is coming up later in the show. But first, President Trump vows to revisit DACA if Congress fails to make progress on immigration reform. His promise comes after Catholic leaders and other groups cried out with concern. Correspondent Mark Irons begins our team coverage from the White House. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. President Trump says he has no second thoughts about his decision to allow young, undocumented immigrants to be deported, but he's leaving room for review, telling lawmakers they have 6 months to fix the issue in a way that puts hardworking American citizens first.
Thank you very much.
The president drops the DACA program into the hands of lawmakers, expecting Congress to achieve immigration reform.
I hope they do. I certainly hope they do.
President Trump discusses congressional priorities with the top Republicans and Democrats he invited to meet with him at the White House. Amidst all the talk of tax reform, funding hurricane relief, and raising the debt ceiling, Trump adds in a tweet, Congress now has 6 months to legalize DACA, something the Obama administration was unable to do. If they can't, I will revisit this issue. The president's message about Dreamers comes right after his decision to terminate the program that protected the young immigrants from deportation.
I have a love for these people, and hopefully now Congress will be able to help them and do it properly.
Still, the Trump administration has already begun unwinding DACA. They have halted new applications, and they are forcing Dreamers to reapply for work permits before October 5th. But current applications will continue to be processed, and existing permits remain in effect. The Trump administration says ending DACA this way provides the best opportunity for Dreamers.
You could have an orderly wind down by the Department of Homeland Security over the next 6 months, giving Congress time to act.
President Trump still faces a lot of pushback from Catholic bishops across the country who denounce his decision. And the University of Notre Dame president, Father John Jenkins, is defiant, saying Notre Dame will continue to support DACA students financially, maintain their enrollment, even if Congress fails to act.
The president said today he would like to see Congress come up with an immigration reform plan that includes good border security and a DACA plan where everybody is happy. Lauren.
There are a lot of other issues facing Congress and the president. What is at the very top of the president's list?
Well, tonight he's at an oil refinery in North Dakota pushing for major tax overhaul, something that has been accomplished since the Reagan presidency.
Correspondent Mark Irons at the White House. Thank you, Mark. President Trump's action on immigration draws a sharp response from lawmakers who are back in town after a recess. This includes Catholics in Congress. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi continues our team coverage tonight. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Protection for young illegal immigrants ends very soon. So tonight, lawmakers wrestle with what exactly to do, and they're hearing from the young immigrants who have the most to lose.
Thank you for coming to all of our events. Yeah.
College senior Mirka Dominguez begs senators to protect her so she can follow her dream of becoming a teacher. She's one of nearly 800,000 young people brought to the United States illegally by their parents.
Try not to think about it because it's This is literally my whole life. This is what I want to make a career out of. And DACA is like my hope.
President Trump says Congress has 6 months to come up with a solution for the Dreamers, yet even lawmakers are worried that the job won't get done. It's putting your feet to the fire for sure.
Well, and that's a good thing. Congress should have its feet put to the fire.
Can't get this one done, then I am worried about ever really doing immigration reform.
While the U.S. Bishops' Conference slammed the president's decision to end DACA, Catholic Congressman Andy Harris defends Trump.
This is not a matter of faith. Bishops nor the Pope spoke ex cathedra on this issue. They have their opinion. The fact of the matter is they aren't happy with a lot of laws in the United States, but the fact of the matter is we're a nation of the rule of law. The law is that you have to come to this country legally.
Speaker Ryan admits he'll have to compromise to get the votes to help the Dreamers. That could include money for border security to appease conservatives. But DACA supporters like Dominguez don't like that.
They're seeing us as kind of like objects and like pawns in some sort of game, and we don't want that. We don't want them to negotiate with our lives. Yeah, we're people, and we're asking to be treated with humanity, and it's cruel that we're not getting that treatment.
Many advocates predict a bill to protect these young immigrants will pass if Speaker Ryan brings it up for a vote, but that could anger conservatives. Ryan says he's not going to fast-track immigration reform. Instead, we'll watch it all play out in the slow, traditional process. Lauren?
What are the political ramifications of this, Jason?
The 6-month timetable ends around March, just when the primary season is underway for every single seat in the House and many in the Senate. Now, many Republicans who serve in conservative districts could face major backlash and a possible primary challenger if they back anything that's seen as amnesty.
Correspondent Jason Calvi on Capitol Hill, thank you for that thorough report. I am now joined by Republican Senator Luther Strange of Alabama. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
You believe President Trump made the right decision and say the DACA program is unconstitutional. Why do you say that?
Well, as the former Attorney General, I spent 6 years litigating cases like this, and I'm confident that the DACA decision that was made in the previous administration is unconstitutional, and ultimately it would be found so. So I applaud the President's going ahead and giving Congress a period of time to allow for an adjustment, allow for us to take into account, the complexities of the issue, the fairness, the compassion that we want to incorporate in how we address this. And that's really actually where this issue should be solved anyway.
Well, as you said, he has turned it over to you, and with all of the issues on your plate, on the agenda, is Congress going to be able to handle this one?
Well, I've been very disappointed in our inability to address some fundamental issues, as you know, but this is an important one. I think it goes hand in hand with a couple of other things that people expect us to do, like securing our borders. I think people have a lack of confidence that we're actually going to enforce even the existing laws. And so my hope is that this will focus Congress's attention. The President has given us an opportunity, and we need to take it. I'm in the camp of those thinking that we can do more than one thing at a time. These are all very important issues that people care about, involve people's lives, and we've got to address them.
I'd like to switch topics. You're a pro-life senator, and pro-life leaders wrote a letter to Congress yesterday asking to immediately address the stalled health care bill, and that would defund Planned Parenthood for 1 year. What are you doing to make sure this happens?
Well, we're meeting today just in a little while to talk about doing that. It's important. I fully support that effort to defund Planned Parenthood. And the question we will have to face, once again, is do we have 51 conservatives, pro-life advocates who are willing to support this effort? And I haven't done a head count recently. I'm very hopeful that we do.
And if you do, what message does that send not only to the pro-life groups, but to the anti-life groups?
Well, the message I hope it sends is that we're a nation that respects life, that we treasure life, and that we can accomplish these things, get the system back to where it should be. We should never have the federal government funding abortions, and supporting Planned Parenthood. So I'm very hopeful it'll send a message that the pro-life forces are on the move and are getting things done.
We've really been hit by hurricanes, Hurricane Harvey, and now it looks like Hurricane Irma is charging toward the U.S. You're in the South. What are your plans? How will you support relief efforts?
Well, it's a real humanitarian crisis, and I've lived through them in Alabama. Now our friends in Houston and Texas are dealing with it. I plan to support the necessary supplies, financial and otherwise, for the victims. And then I applaud the president and the local officials in Florida for being proactive as they face a looming storm. It could be my state next. So this brings out, honestly, the best in America. Our charitable impulses are on display, and a neighbor helping neighbor. So I think it's one of our finest hours, actually, the response here. And I think the federal government can and should and will do its part in making sure that we address the victims of these tragedies.
Senator Luther Strange of Alabama, thank you so much for joining us.
Always great to be with you. Thank you.
Donald Trump Jr. is expected to take questions about whether the Trump campaign colluded with Russia. Trump Jr. will meet privately with staff members of the Senate Judiciary Committee tomorrow. Questions are likely to focus on a meeting he attended at Trump Tower with a Russian lawyer and others during the campaign. Top military and intelligence chiefs briefed Congress today on North Korean strategy. It comes as the president tells British Prime Minister Theresa May now is not the time to talk to North Korea. The president has also spoken recently about North Korea with the leaders of China and South Korea. Is the Castro regime in Cuba coming to an end? The country has started a 5-month political transition expected to end with Raul Castro's departure from the presidency. For the rest of the month, Cubans will meet in small groups to nominate local representatives to vote for officials. Castro has said he will leave the presidency but is expected to remain head of the Communist Party, giving him power that may be equal to or greater than the new president. German police are trying to figure out who threw a tomato or 2 tomatoes at Chancellor Angela Merkel during a campaign event yesterday. One tomato glanced off Merkel's hip and hit a moderator next to her. Merkel reacted calmly, offering the moderator a tissue. Pope Francis heads to Colombia for 5 days to help heal the wounds of Latin America's longest-running armed conflict. It's between leftist rebel groups known as the FARC and the government, who are trying to make peace after decades of violence and rebellion. The Holy Father is encouraging ordinary Colombians to balance their need for justice with forgiveness. The Pope left Rome early this morning on the papal plane, which had to change its flight path to avoid Hurricane Irma. Edward Patten, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us. Welcome, Ed. What are the main purposes of this visit?
Well, Lauren, as the Pope said on the flight over to Colombia today, he said his main task is really to help Colombia in its path to peace. He really wants to bring together the parties involved in this conflict, which are bitterly divided over the terms of a peace agreement. And that's really the key message he wants to get across is let's make a first step. That's the theme of the trip. And he wants both sides to recognize the hurts on either side and to seek forgiveness.
Walk us through the highlights of this trip.
Well, he's visiting 4 cities, and he's really keen to meet, obviously, the civil and political leaders who are involved in this peace process. He'll also meet regional and national church leaders, but also he's going to beatify 2 priests who were martyred during the 50 years of conflict. They were 2, of course, who died of the 260,000 who died during those years of conflict. And he'll also visit the Church of St. Peter Claver, who was the patron saint of slaves.
You know, the Pope is visiting yet another place of conflict. We've been following Venezuela's uprising. Is this a trend? Is the Pope going to places that are in conflict?
This does seem to be the trend, Lauren, yes, because 5 of the last 9 overseas trips that he's made have been to places of conflict. And although that's obviously not the sole purpose of his visits, that does seem to be something that he's very keen to do, is to be a global peacemaker with the assistance of his Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin. And of course, his next trip after this will be to Burma, which is also a place of conflict, an internal conflict which has been going on for many years.
Thank you so much for your insights, Edward Patten, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register.
Thanks, Lauren.
Another one of the 4 dubia cardinals who asked the Pope for clarification on his The Joy of Love letter has died. Cardinal Carlo Caffarra passed away this morning after a long illness. He was 79. The cardinal led the Diocese of Bologna for nearly 12 years. He was considered a leading expert on marriage and the family. He's the second dubia cardinal to pass away after the death of Cardinal Meisner in July. I'm Lauren Ashburn. You're watching EWTN News Nightly. Coming up, preparing for Hurricane Irma. Naples area Congressman Francis Rooney on what the state is doing and how Congress will help. Kentucky could soon become the first state in the country without an abortion clinic. A battle started today in Louisville in a courtroom over a law requiring the clinic have agreements with a local hospital in case of an emergency. The trial is expected to last 2 or 3 days. Irma is the most powerful hurricane in the Atlantic Ocean ever, and Florida is preparing for a possible direct hit. Irma made landfall in the Northeast Caribbean this morning. In Florida, residents are lining up at grocery stores and gas stations trying to get supplies before the storm comes ashore. Irma could hit Florida later this week. On Twitter, President Trump says, watching hurricane closely, my team, which has done and is doing such a good job in Texas, is already in Florida. No rest for the weary. The tweet came hours before the president met with congressional leaders to discuss funding to help victims of Hurricanes Harvey and Irma. The president met with leaders from both sides of the aisle and chambers today in the Oval Office. Congressman Francis Rooney of Florida joins us now. Thank you so much for being here.
Lauren, thank you for having me back on.
I want you to know that our team here at EWTN has been praying for those who have been and will be impacted by Hurricane Irma. That is in your district. How are people preparing?
Well, I hope that people are heeding some of the messages that we've been sending out about the contacts for the emergency operations people and the first responders and the police. And I just, prayers are key, and we have to hope that this thing won't go where they say it's going to go, and that if it does go, that people will heed the warnings that have been put out and get to high ground and be prepared to evacuate if possible.
The business on the Hill, on Capitol Hill, continues, and as we mentioned earlier in our newscast, President Trump has cut a deal with Democrats to fund the government and raise the federal borrowing limit for 3 months, and that is to speed recovery for Hurricane Harvey. What is your reaction to this?
Well, I think it's imperative that we fund FEMA to take care of the devastation that happened in Texas, and I guess we're going to have to get ready to do it again next week. And of course, the debt ceiling is a separate issue. I kind of, as a business person, I'm always bemused by all this discussion of the debt ceiling. It's not about the debt ceiling. We have to pay our debts. That's what makes us the full faith and credit of the world. What we've got to do is get our spending under control.
And that is going to be accomplished how?
Good question. You know, we have had difficulty in this Congress cutting mandatory spending. And if you look at the federal government, 1/3 is Social Security, 1/3 is all of the Medicaid, welfare, Medicare, et cetera, benefits. And so that leaves 1/3 for everything else. And of that 1/3, 2/3 defense.
And it seems like this is going to be something that Republicans are really pushing for. I'm wondering what is going to be able to be accomplished by this Congress by the end of the year. There is so much that is on your plate.
Well, yeah, because you know that the Senate struck out on health care reform after the House did the heavy lifting, and we're still reeling from disappointment about that. And now we have the opportunity for comprehensive tax reform, which I've been pushing over here to include a requirement that able-bodied persons be actively engaged seeking work or get work in order to have a claim on any benefits. And I think that will help a lot to solve our workplace problems as well as to reduce the cost of the entitlements.
Thank you so much for joining us, Congressman Francis Rooney of Naples, Florida area. And again, our prayers are with all of your constituents.
Thanks, Lauren. Have a great day.
You too. Up next, Vatican meeting, we'll talk to one U.S. lawmaker who wants to follow the Pope's directive to bring faith to work. Plus, dedicating a cathedral to Mother Teresa. A look at a consecration in Kosovo. A cathedral is dedicated to St. Mother Teresa in the Kosovan capital of Pristina. It's been a year since she was canonized by Pope Francis, and on the 20th anniversary of her death in 1997. Albanian clergy, including a Muslim imam, attended. Pope Francis met with Catholic politicians around the world last month. It was founded by Cardinal Christoph Schönborn of Vienna and British parliamentarian Lord David Alton. This happened in 2010. Now, during this year's annual gathering of the International Catholic Legislators Network, the Pope told lawmakers to bring Catholic teaching into public life. Our next guest is a U.S. politician who attended that meeting with the Pope. Joining me now is Democratic Representative Dan Lipinski of Illinois. Welcome to the program.
Good to be with you, Lauren.
How is it possible to bring Catholic teaching to Congress when about 1/3 of the members of the House and 1/4 of the Senate are Catholic, and the general tone right now on Capitol Hill is so acrimonious?
Well, as the Pope spoke to us in our private audience at the ICLN conference, he talked about building bridges between viewpoints. And even though we have so many Catholics in Congress, there are very different viewpoints, unfortunately, on many issues. I'm a pro-life Democrat. There are not too many
That's true.
Catholics who, actually, I'm the only Catholic in the Democratic caucus in the House who's pro-life. But what we really need to do is to build those bridges of dialogues, as the Pope urged us to do, so we can really bring a real good understanding of human personhood.
You met with other Catholic legislators from around the world. How are they tackling this directive by Pope Francis?
We have some similar issues in our countries, and we have some differing issues. Things that we talked about, obviously, there are issues around much of the world in regard to family issues and to the issues of life. And so we are all working on ways that we can really engage in dialogue those who may not agree with us with a really clear understanding of what we understand to be personhood.
How has your Catholic faith influenced your decision to ask Congress for bipartisan support on DACA?
I have supported the Bridge Act. I'm a co-sponsor. I signed on 4 months ago, and that would give 3 years of protection to DACA recipients and give us time to pass a comprehensive immigration reform. This is a place where we really need to sit down and talk and have that dialogue that Pope Francis talked about.
As one of only 2 pro-life representatives, what is that like?
Well, when I first got to Congress 12.5 years ago, there were many more pro-life Democrats. It's very unfortunate that we are down to really 2 strong pro-life Democrats. We have a few life issues that we have other Democrats who join us. But I think it's very critical for the pro-life movement to be in both parties.
Congressman Dan Lipinski of Illinois, one of only 2 pro-life Democrats in Congress. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Lauren.
Finally tonight, faith and football. The Jacksonville Jaguars' Paul Posluszny spoke to the National Catholic Register about how he's not only dedicated to football, but most importantly to God and his Catholic faith. He says we're given everything in the Mass since we're given nothing less than Jesus. This is done through the hands of a priest, as is being baptized, being forgiven in confession, and so forth. You can read more from the interview with the National Catholic Register right now at ncregister.com. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless you.